To answer that question, I'd like to tell you a bit of a story. Story about a planet that, when I was born, there were only 3 billion people on the planet. I mean, resources seemed endless. We dug things out of the ground, we cleared forests, we dumped our waste in rivers, oceans, in landfill. Everything seemed fantastic. Now we have 7.7 billion people on the planet. And by 2040, there will be over 9 billion people on the planet. So in my lifetime, or well, I hope it's my lifetime in 2040, the population of the planet will have tripled, and yet it's the same planet. It's the same resources, it's the same things that we had all those years ago. So sustainably and equitably feeding the planet is basically impossible. And why do I say that? That's because if you look at the habitable areas of the planet, we use 50% of our habitable land for agriculture. The rest is essential rainforests and savannas, the lungs of the planet. Of that 50% that we use of the habitable land for agriculture, 75% is used for livestock in some way, shape or form. So that's either in grazing or in growing crops to feed those animals. And with water, it's actually not much better. By 2025, they believe that 2/3 of the world will be living in water-stressed environment. So that gives us a major problem because we simply can't keep eating the way that we all do here today. All this wonderful food that we've had here today, the rest of the world can't have that, or we have to have less. And if everybody on the planet were to eat the way we've all eaten here today, then basically that is physically impossible. There is not enough habitable land on the planet to feed everyone on the planet today the way we are all eating here. Just think about that. Not enough land on the planet. So what do we do? How do we cope with that? And what we need to do is we need to do things differently. So doing the same old, the linear approach, we'll just grow a few more animals, clear a few more forests. That is simply not going to do it. As we heard Gary say this morning, technology is becoming exponential. We need exponential solutions to the problems. So how do we get those solutions? We get those solutions, as we have had so many times in the past, through science and technology. Science and technology is the answer to how we are going to feed the planet. But which technologies? Martin talked in the keynote in the conference this morning about just how many things change in a mere 12 months. So which technologies? I mean, I could talk to you for the rest of the conference about all the new technologies around, but I think our organizer Roman would come and drag me off stage at some point. Might get mobbed by some of the other presenters as well. But what I want to do then is just give you 3 technologies that really will make a major difference to what we do. And before I do that, what I'd like to do is just say to you, technologies, when they're new, often get called unnatural, they're called Franken products. And just to set the scene a little bit, I want you to think about ice cubes. Now, we all go to our refrigerator, we get our ice cubes out, we put them in our drink, we don't think about them. But do you know that back in the 1800s there were ice barons? They had natural ice. Natural ice melted slower than this artificial mechanical ice. But do we go to the fridge now and take out our mechanical man-made ice? No, we just go and get ice out of the refrigerator. We don't actually think about it as anything other than just plain old ice. And if we have a look at something else as well, what about IVF? These people used to be called test tube babies many years ago. But do we now have two types of humans on the planet? Do we have test tube IVF humans and normal humans? Of course we don't. It's just a different way of conception. It's a different way of getting to the same endpoint. So we just have to think about how things become familiar. And as things become familiar, they become more accepted, and society views them as just something natural. And that brings me to the first technology I'd like to talk about. Now, have you ever asked yourself, why do we grow a whole cow or a chicken just to get the meat? I mean, we don't really want a cow or a chicken, do we? We want a steak, we want a chicken breast, we want meat. That's basically what we want. So up until now, though, we really haven't had much choice, have we? I mean, how do you get a steak without growing a cow? Well, that's been impossible. But now you can. Now you can literally have your cow and eat it too. And that's a technology called cell-based meat, where you can actually grow the meat. And the best way to think about that is to think of a brewery. Now, when we make beer, we take the hops, we take all the ingredients in, we put the yeast, and we brew it up, and then we take off the yeast and we keep the beer. Who thinks keeping the beer is a good idea? Yeah? Yeah, sounds good to me. Now, if you think about cell-based meat in the same way, basically we take all the ingredients required, we put the animal cells in, we grow the animal cells, and then instead of throwing away the cells and keeping the liquid, we just do it the other way around. So that is simply how we make meat without the animal. Now you might be thinking, oh, yuck, Frankenmeat. Ah, yes, I'm in your brain. I can see you're thinking that. So yeah, but go back to our ice, our natural ice, or our IVF babies. Do we think of those things as unnatural today? No, we don't, because we're familiar with those. But what does that apply to us as consumers? Well, what I want you to think about is, I've got two hamburgers in my hand. One of which, there's a picture of Daisy here next to this hamburger. Daisy's dead. Daisy is your hamburger. But here on the other hand, I have another hamburger. And that's made from a few cells from Jenny, and Jenny here is still in the fields grazing away. So we've got a cow and eat it too. And most people I've asked, which one of those two would you eat? The vast majority have said, well, the one where it didn't die. If it's identical, just as safe, just as nutritious, and I can tell you, I know companies have done all these tests, and yes, they are virtually indistinguishable. They are indistinguishable from each other. And then we look at what can be done with these technologies, and I say to people, okay, the one from Jenny here, what if I tell you that's now low cholesterol, no saturated fat, and high in omega-3s? And they say, oh, gee, that's even better. And then I say, well, just put the icing on the cake. How about I tell you less land, less water usage, and that just puts people over the top. Because what I often do with these things, my benchmark for whether people have heard of some of these technologies is my Uber driver. When I go to conferences around the world, I've been to San Francisco a couple of times, Silicon Valley, and you'd expect if any place knows what's going on with new technologies, it's going to be people in Silicon Valley, right? Only one of 12 Uber drivers that I talked to had thought they had heard of one of these technologies. So that tells me that there's a long way to go before any of these technologies even start to become mainstream. So when we look at what we can do with these technologies, we can make a fundamental difference with this cell-based technology. And then what I'd like to do now is go on to our next technology. And that's synthetic biology. So if you look at synthetic biology, how many people here know of someone that has, maybe that you have, type 1 or type 2 diabetes? We all know someone who's got something there, yeah? Well, how about insulin? Insulin is an example of synthetic biology. The insulin used to be made from trainloads of pig pancreases, shipped thousands of kilometres to have the insulin extracted. Highly inefficient, really not a good process at all. Then in 1982, a company called Genentech and another company called Eli Lilly decided to make synthetic insulin from genetically edited organisms. And ever since then, the vast majority of insulin in the world has been made through synthetic biology by genetically edited organisms. People have been injecting these into their bodies for the last 37 years. Now, if you want to have a look at something more in the food side of things, how about rennet? People heard of rennet, how we make cheese? You put rennet enzyme into milk, it separates out, you get the lumpy bits, that makes the cheese, and the rest is the whey protein. That used to be made from the fourth stomach of a 2-day-old dead calf. Cut up, put into milk, and it made cheese. And one theory of how that happened was way in the back in the dim dark past. Someone had some milk to take somewhere. They had a spare calf stomach, so they put the milk in, got to the other end, thought, this has gone a bit lumpy, I wonder what it tastes like. Yum, this is good. There we have cheese. So again, it's really interesting what we think of as natural. If I asked you, I'm pretty sure all of you would say cheese is a natural product. And I look at that and go, well, maybe not that natural as it might be. If we go on to what's happening now, we have a company called Perfect Day. And what they are doing is they are using genetically edited organisms to make whey, which is what's left over after we make the cheese. There's a massive market for that around the world. And what these people are doing is turning that whey into animal-free whey protein ice cream. They recently did 1,000 3-litre packs of product, and that was only a couple of weeks ago released into the US market, and they had an ice cream truck going around giving away the product for free. So that product's not science fiction, that's science fact. We have genetically engineered proteins on the market now. We also have another company called Clara Foods, and they are doing animal-free, chicken-free, egg white proteins for things like your meringues and even high-protein drinks or whatever there. And these ones, the Perfect Day product, that'll be on the market in 2021. You had to buy products in 2021. So this is not something that's 10 years, 20 years. It's not from Star Trek. This is something that's going to be available now. And our third category is alternative proteins. And you've probably heard a lot about alternative proteins, and I'm not going to bore you with the ones that you've really heard of. But the point with alternative proteins is we all think that alternative proteins come from animals, they come from plants, but why? That's just what we're accustomed to, what we think of as normal, natural, usual. So I'll give you a couple of products that are a bit out there. How about food from electricity? There's a company called Solar Foods in Finland, and what they do is they use solar energy to generate electricity, to break water down into hydrogen and oxygen. They add some minerals in there, and then they put microbes in there which use the hydrogen and everything else to create protein. And it can be used for human foods, it can be used for animal foods, it can be used for all sorts of things. And the great thing about that product is not only is it really, really efficient, 1,000 times less water than conventional proteins, but you don't have to use arable land. You can use deserts. You only need a small amount of water, so you can use non-arable land to produce protein to feed the world. And the next one is a company called R-Biome. And what they do is they make food from wood. They use genetically engineered yeast to actually ferment wood to produce protein. They can use byproducts of mills, paper mills. They can also use things, parts of trees that are normally just burnt and, of course, contribute to greenhouse gases and just go to waste. And they can actually turn those into food. So if we look at these three technologies, they really have the ability to make a massive impact on how we feed the world. Because as we talked about before, if we stick to the current systems, there's just no way of sustainably feeding 9 billion people on this planet. So we have to take this exponential approach of new technologies, make leaps in how we do things to equitably and sustainably feed the world. But the thing is, what it needs is it needs me and you and everyone here to actually keep an open mind on these new technologies and to look at what they can deliver, look at what they can do for the world. And we have to try them and accept them, because what these products need is social license. Social license meaning that it doesn't matter how good a technology is. If consumers don't buy the product, it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, I got a great technology, no one buys it. I'm just another failed startup or another failed organisation. So we need to ensure that we keep that open mind, that we talk to people, we think about it, that we don't let ourselves be influenced by unscientific ideas, by propaganda, by interest groups that just have a very narrow view on how things should be done. Because if we don't, we are not going to feed 9 billion people on this planet. So if we go back to our first question, will feeding the world kill the planet? The answer, if we use these new technologies, is no. Feeding the planet, feeding the world, doesn't have to kill the planet. The choice is ours, and it's up to all of us here at Future Port Prague, when we're looking at these new technologies, to embrace them. Not just come here as observers, but to really get involved and help change the future of the planet and make sure that we can sustainably and equitably feed the world for the decades to come. Thank you.